Student activism is an important part of the Western experience, and Stan's Awareness Day is a perfect example of this.
Students shed light on the Darfur conflict through the act of remembrance, so let's take a look at what they did.
I'm here with Simran, and we're wondering, what is the Darfur situation?
So since 2003, there's been conflict in the area of Darfur, which is the western region of Sudan, and it started in 2003 with two different rebel movements that attacked government military installations in the area, and they were fighting for more rights, just fighting against oppression that they faced in the area from the central government in Khartoum. And when that happened, the government responded. It was a counterinsurgency campaign, but they responded by attacking civilians primarily, and it was very violent and very widespread. So many people have called it a genocide. Some places haven't. The U.S. has called it a genocide, but that in effect is what was happening from 2003 to around 2005 when the violence was at its height. The government was carrying out bombing campaigns on villages, and they were arming these proxy militias. They're called the Janjaweed, and they would go through to villages and attack civilians and kill or rape and loot the villages. And so between 2003 and 2005, that's when the most violence was happening. Even though the situation is still occurring right now, there's still a very big crisis. The biggest problem right now is that so many people have been uprooted from their homes. So there's almost 3 million people that are living in refugee or internally displaced persons camps, either so within Sudan or in neighboring countries. And this is a very big problem because the camps are so overcrowded. There's so many people living there, and resources are low, and disease and starvation are very rampant. So a lot of deaths that we're seeing right now are occurring from that, and that's one of the biggest problems. Fighting still occurs, but on a smaller scale. So that's kind of in a nutshell what's happening. It's a lot more complex, and there's still so many people that are suffering. So that's what STAN is here to do. We're here to raise awareness about what's happening and get the Canadian government, to be more of a leader in acting against it.
How does STAN get people's attention?
So what we do as a chapter here at Western, a lot of what we do is focused on raising awareness and educating people about what's happening. So we'll do things like what you see right here, our Atrium Day, where we have displays set up and pamphlets and information, so people walking by, we can just try to get it out to as many people as we can. A lot of people may have heard about it but don't know very much about what exactly it is. So that's a big focus of ours, just educating, because when we can educate people, they'll be more motivated to act, and then the more people we can mobilize, the more we can have an impact on what the Canadian government actually does. So that's a lot of what we focus on.
What can we as the people do to help?
The biggest thing is, I would say, first, educating yourself so you know the ins and outs of the situation, and then through that, advocating the government. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. It seems like a very big task to say that we can have an impact on what the federal government does, but it could be things as simple as writing a letter to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We actually have this line set up called 1-800-GENOCIDE, and that's actually the numbers that you would call. And it gives you the option to talk directly to, not directly, but it puts you through to the line of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Leader of the Opposition, and the leader of a few other parties. And through that, you can either leave messages or talk to their secretaries, and you can voice your concern about what's happening and say that as a Canadian citizen, you want the government to take more action. So simple things like that is what we're trying to tell people that they can do to have an impact overall.
So far, what response have the students given you?
It's been very, very great here at Western, and I think a lot of other chapters have experienced that. People do want to know what's happening. It's just a lot of the times they don't have the information, and it's not something that is widespread on the news that they talk about every day. So that's what we try to do, just make sure that it's put out into the spotlight, because it is very urgent and it is one of the biggest crises happening right now. So the response we get is really great, that people find out about what's happening and then they say, what can we do? And that's always the part that we want to make sure that we give people concrete things, like come out to this event and learn more, a little bit more, or call this number, or write a letter to, or send an email, and like things like that. So it's those little steps. that can make a big impact if all of us do it. The 23rd to 25th of November, we're actually having a refugee simulation just out on Concrete Beach outside the UCC, and we're going to try as best we can to mimic the situation that people are living in refugee and IDP camps, and it's going to be a fundraiser for 2 different charities that we're going to announce a little bit later on. And that's just trying to get people to understand how big of a crisis this is, and especially for the people that have been displaced, and that's one of the biggest issues we need to solve right now.